One of the things that we need to do prior to putting the harness on is a pre-use inspection. This inspection process is the same for the Technicurve harness as it would be for any of our other MSA harnesses that we make. One of the things that we need to look at is going to be the label, one of 5 components that we're going to do on our pre-use inspection. This label happens to be in a label pack. You could have a label sewn to the inside of the back strap as well. What are we looking for on the label? We want to make sure that the label is present, the label is legible, and it has all the information that we need on it. One important thing is going to be the inspection grid on the back, which tells us whether or not a competent person has looked at this harness within the last 6 months in construction or 1 year in general industry. Once we've found that the labels are in good shape and intact, we can move to step number 2, which is looking at the webbing on the harness. So what we're going to do is use our hands to rub it over the webbing, checking for imperfections such as fraying, cuts, tears. Another thing that we want to look at is whether or not the webbing is pliable. We want to run it over a radius, make sure it's nice and supple. That way it's in good shape. If it's extremely dirty, you'll kind of feel a crunching noise when you put it together, and you're going to want to clean it out. If that doesn't fix the problem, you're going to want to replace the harness. Third thing that we're going to look at on the harness is going to be stitching. So we want to check the inspection points wherever the stitching is coming together. We use a contrasting color thread in order to easily locate where these locations are on the harness. We want to check where the upper part of the harness comes to the lower part. We want to check across the chest strap. We want to check above the connection buckles. We want to check the subpelvic strap and where the leg straps are attached. Once we've gone through the labels, the webbing, the stitching, we want to look at the plastic parts. So the back D-shim is an important piece. We want to make sure there's no breakage, no deformity, none of that type of stuff. It needs to be in good shape. We also have various keepers around the harness, a keeper on the chest strap, and on this case we've got tongue buckle legs, so we have a keeper for the tongue buckle legs. Once we've gone through that, we want to check the metal components. So you've got your back D-ring. You want to make sure that that's in good shape. You want to make sure that any metal component that has a moving piece, such as this adjuster buckle, we want to make sure that's in place and that it holds its position properly. When we have a secure fit buckle, we want to make sure that the buckle will attach together properly and that it comes apart properly. That way you're assured that that harness, once adjusted, is going to stay right where you want it. As we've discussed before, we need to do a pre-use inspection before we assemble our fall arrest system or our positioning system. We've talked about the harness. Now we're going to talk about some of the other components that we're going to use as part of our fall protection system. When we look at this rack here, we've got some restraint lanyards. We also have some shock absorbing lanyards. So if we can follow those same 5 steps as they apply, we'll be looking at labels, we'll be looking at either webbing, cable, or rope. We'll be looking at stitching, we'll be looking at metal components, and in some cases there may be plastic components we got to deal with as well. So to start with, we'll look at this restraint lanyard. Here we have a label. The label's going to tell us how this product is supposed to be used. It also has a chart in the back which will tell us our competent person has looked at this either once every 6 months or once a year as it applies to the type of work that you're doing. We want to look at the function of the snap hook itself. So we want to make sure that it disengages properly, and then when we let go, it goes to a strong locking position. And we want to make sure that nothing is bent. We want to make sure we don't have a lot of corrosion. We want to look at how the webbing is stitched together and make sure that we've got a good solid piece of webbing all the way through. Here we have an adjuster. We want to make sure that underneath the adjuster that we don't have anything that could cause a problem. And that's how we would inspect a web restraint lanyard. Moving to cable. Cable, we've got the labels. We also have the snap hook. We want to look at the ferrule to make sure that it's in a nice round shape and that it's not elongated. We also want to make sure that the ferrules are in good shape as far as being crimped on properly. We want to make sure that the cable isn't pulling through. We want to look at the outside of the cable. In this case, we have a vinyl wrapped cable. If the vinyl happens to be damaged, that's not the end of the use of this particular product, because the cable is the strength component. We want to make sure that the cable is in good shape, that we don't have any broken wires sticking out, we don't have any kinks in the product. That way it's good to use. The next product that you could have would be a rope product. Here we've got a thimble at the bottom of the rope. We've got a manually braided section that we have as a termination. We want to make sure that the hog ring is in place. We want to make sure that the braid is nice and smooth all the way through the rope. We want to be careful to look for any broken fibers that we may have. There could be a condition called hockling in the rope, where the rope has become unbraided. We want to make sure that if we have this condition, that we can roll it back down into a nice smooth braid. If we can't roll it back into a smooth braid, then we want to take that product out of service. Moving on to a shock absorbing lanyard. I know it's a shock absorbing lanyard because the label is going to tell me it's a shock absorbing lanyard. I want to look at this product the way that it's stitched. I want to ensure that anytime that I have material that's bunched together, that I pull it apart and do a full inspection of all these pieces to make sure I don't have any hidden cuts or abrasion or points of failure that I could have if I wasn't inspecting it closely. I also want to make sure that the snap hook operates properly, as stated before. On this product as well, I want to make sure that the flag on the inside has not been deployed as it has been on this one. This would be a clear warning that I'm not supposed to use this product because it's been involved in a fall. And again, once any product is involved in a fall, we have to be careful to take it out of service, secure it so that no one else can use it. Moving on to a pouched type lanyard. Here we have a vinyl pouch. So here we have our plastic product. We'd want to make sure that we looked at the inside to make sure that the integrity of the shock absorber is maintained. We want to look at any stitching that could be on the lanyard itself and make sure it's in good shape. Here we have another adjuster, so we want to check under the adjuster to make sure it's operating properly, that we don't have any hidden debris or anything that could cause a problem. Here we have our FP5K snap hook. This is more like a carabiner, so we want to make sure that this disengages properly, and then when it comes back, it locks into place into a strong locking position. This is the same product, only in a cable, and again, we'd use those same procedures that we talked about before. We want to make sure that the ferrules are tight and that they're not cracked. We also want to make sure that the thimble maintains a nice round shape so that we can tell whether or not this has been loaded. Looking at the connections that we have, making sure that the vinyl's in good shape, but more importantly, the cable underneath. And again, coming back to the snap hook or the FP5K hook in this case, and making sure that it operates properly. This Workman lanyard also incorporates the tear tape technology inside of the pouch, making sure that I'm looking at the label, using the product properly, making sure that the function of the snap hook operates properly on both ends. Here I've got my date to show whether or not it's been competently inspected within the last 6 months or within the last year. I also want to take and make sure that the webbing all the way through is in good shape. This is a GL3100 hook. I want to make sure that this opens up and that it closes, and when it closes, that it forms a nice tight locking position. Making sure that your equipment is inspected prior to use is the responsibility of the user. We've been talking about pre-use inspection. Another component in our fall arrest system is going to be the Anchorage Connector. So here we have several different Anchorage connectors. First one we'll talk about will be the Anchorage Connector strap. We have a label. The label will outline the proper use. Here we've got our date grid, which will show us the competent person inspection that's been done. We follow the same 5 guidelines that we followed in all of our other pre-use inspections. We're going to check and make sure that we have labels. We're going to check and make sure that the metal components are properly functioning and that they're in great shape. We're also going to look at the stitching on the component, and then we're also going to check the webbing throughout the component as well for wear, tear, burn marks, abrasion, those types of things. Keeping in rule, when in doubt, you want to throw it out. This is the Point Guard Anchorage Connector. Here we have the label. We've got the D-ring. The D-ring's nice and round, doesn't have any corrosion. We're also going to check the stitching to make sure the stitch pattern's in good shape and that the webbing on the component is in good shape as well. Moving to a carabiner, this is kind of an interlink between different systems. We want to make sure that the gate rotates, opens, and shuts and that it stays closed when it is closed. We don't want it to be misshapen. We don't want to have a lot of corrosion on it. We want to keep this equipment in good shape. Next Anchorage connector that we have is the Strider Anchorage connector. This adjusts in and out in order to accommodate different beam sizes. We want to make sure that the latching pins